Senzenina,
senzenina, senzenina, senzenina, senzenina, senzenina.
The situation in the 1980s in Indonesia was perhaps no different from many other parts of the country.
We're settled here. It's our land. We fought for it. We've worked for it. This is ours.
The state of emergency made open political work very difficult. Organizations were restricted, meetings were declared illegal, so obviously marches and things were ruled out.
Fighting for power in that country. We have a just cause on our side. It is our country.
When Yusuf was growing up, he was rather passive and a very quiet child, I'd say. At school, he used to excel in his schoolwork. He was a good student.
My brother Prakash was the kind of person that was, as any natural person would be, he was a bubbly person, very humorous. He was young, talented, gifted. He was outspoken as well, and he had a lot of character in him as well, personality-wise. So he was a brilliant person growing up as an individual.
When the unit was established, first it was Prakash and myself, and then we recruited Yusuf into the unit.
The ANC wanted a unit to be operating within the Indian areas because there was no MK activity in many of these areas, and therefore thought it was prudent that it needed to be a unit of essentially Indian activists for a whole range of reasons, mainly that it would be easier for them to operate. And on that basis, the three of them constituted the Amity unit as the nucleus of that unit, and over time were sent out for different periods of training, and Prakash was the actual commander of that unit. They were incredibly skilled at what they did. To have carried out over 35 or 40 odd sabotage operations with the clinical precision that they did it, where no act of sabotage would have taken more than 2 minutes to complete, was just an incredible feat.
I would have been totally clueless to have known that my brother was recruited by the liberation movements, because Prakash did not want to get involved in politics.
We had no idea that him and Prakash were friends. That was how secret these things were.
I never suspected that Yusuf would be involved in MK activities.
You'd never find a picture or a photograph of Yusuf, Prakash and I together. And that was simply because for us at the time it would have been a security risk.
When we think of them as MK people, we need to understand their human qualities, their love for life, and the degree of discipline that they embodied in order to carry out their work.
Even though we lots of people knew us, not many people knew that there was a connection between the three of us, and we basically tried to keep it that way.
When Kasrara was released, they were amongst the first to volunteer their time to be on guard outside his house from 6 to 6. He had no idea that he was in fact being protected by the most skilled MK people in this area.
Part of the work of being in the underground was not only carrying out acts of sabotage. A big part of the work that we did was actually retrieving what we used to call DLBs, dead letter boxes.
We obviously had to go and retrieve the information from the post boxes at very odd hours of the day or at night, when we were absolutely sure that there was nobody around.
And in those dead letter boxes would be a cache of arms.
Once we got the information, sometimes finding the exact location of the material had its own challenges.
What would happen is we would get a map from the regional command, and on that map it will basically give us directions and indications on how to find the cache of weapons.
If that cache was stored, let's say 6 months or a year before, by the time we went to retrieve it, the area would possibly have changed.
The frequency at which we were carrying out attacks was increasing. I mean, towards the end we were carrying out at least 2 sabotage attacks a month. And that included doing all the surveillance, the reconnaissance, the planning, and actually carrying out the activity as well. The last mission that we carried out as a unit took place on the 11th of December 1989. One was at the Hillbrow Police Barracks, and the other one was at Park Station.
What we were really trying to demonstrate was that we had the capacity to do things on a scale that possibly would not have been anticipated by government.
The attack at Park Station was in support of the workers that were at the time striking, and they were actually carrying out a sit-in at the time and in the main Park Station terminal.
And secondly was to demonstrate that there were different kinds of instruments of the apartheid government, whether it was the parliament, whether it was the local bus service, or whether it was the management committee. MK would have been there to demonstrate its opposition to them, and to also give confidence to activists that they were not alone in the political work that they were doing openly.
At Park Station, Prakash was going to place the limpet mine. Yusuf was probably about 50 meters or so as the front lookout, or the vanguard as we called it, ahead of Prakash. And I was about maybe 50 to 60 meters, I can't remember exactly how far, behind Prakash as the rear guard. I think we had basically just left. Prakash was ready to proceed. Yusuf was in front of him. Prakash then followed a few seconds later. I waited at the back. Next thing I heard was just first it was just a blue flash, and almost instantaneously a loud explosion.
On the night that Yusuf was killed, I remember
and that's how Prakash was killed. Yusuf, I think due to his closer proximity, was also killed in the blast.
he dropped me off and I walked to the door, and when I got to the door I turned around to look and I thought, why is he taking so long, what is he waiting for? And for me it's almost as if I felt that it was as if he was saying his last goodbye, just looking for the last time.
It was at 6 o'clock in the morning, and I seen the news on TV and they showed about these boys. But before that, the early morning dream I had was a coffin, a brass coffin that was wrapped over with I don't know what. And this coffin was on the other side, and a lot of people were standing there. It's like God just showed it was your brother.
It's very hard to describe. Up to now I still can't talk about it. It was a rush, I didn't know what was happening. It didn't seem real.
I'd almost felt that I had let Yusuf and Prakash down because I was alive. Why was it not me? Why were Yusuf and Prakash killed? And why was I not the one that had lost my life in a sense?
Even now when I relate the story to somebody, it's very difficult. I become emotional and I can't talk.
I mean, I'd lost the will to live, simply because, I kept thinking that I could have done more. That in a way I had abandoned my two comrades. That they probably would have done more if I was in that position. I don't know, I think it also took me into quite a bit of a depression, in a sense. I basically left the country, my parents, my family not knowing what was happening, myself not knowing what was going to be my future. But for me at that point, it didn't matter.
I don't think there's a day that goes by that I don't think of Prakash, Yusuf and Jamil, because in some ways I carry the responsibility for their deaths.
The ANC was unbanned in February 1990. At that point in time, I was in the Soviet Union.
I was responsible for recruiting them, for setting them up, and their very last mission, I was not here to in fact do what I would normally have done.
I recall the one evening coming into the sort of main camp, and one Soviet comrade came to me and said, "Look, did you know that your organization has been unbanned, and that your leader Nelson Mandela is going to be released from prison?"
Which was to ensure that the final plans had been gone through thoroughly, and to do the debriefing after the mission itself.
I saw these images of people celebrating in the streets, running freely with the ANC banners and running freely with the South African Communist Party banners, and the celebration, the jubilation, the euphoria was there. I could feel it, but I was angry.
I personally feel that the death of any young person for their country, I just have my reservations around that.
I was angry with those people that were celebrating, because how could they be celebrating when Yusuf and Prakash were just killed?
We meet every December 11th at the gravesite of Yusuf. Prakash was cremated, so there's no gravesite, and we remember them.
It was a couple of months after he died that I tried to go. It was too emotional. I couldn't handle it, and I thought I'd never go again. But when I went yesterday, I was much more at peace and at ease. It wasn't as difficult as the first time.
How could this happen 2 months after Yusuf and Prakash were killed? Why could this not have happened 2 months earlier?
I felt that the sacrifice that he had paid, it was untimely. I cannot justify it right now, but I just felt that it was, in my personal opinion, today if I would sit as the pastor and tell you how I personally feel, is that it was not worth it.
We probably would not have been carrying out that attack. If February 1990 happened in November 1989, for argument's sake.
I consoled myself by saying that he did it for a good cause and a good reason.
For me, the struggle was always about equality. It was about bringing dignity to the lives of the masses of South Africa.
But as things are happening now, I'm not so sure if I'm as happy as I was then. Because I think to myself, why did he give his life when there's no real change?
Mother, it is beautiful to fight for freedom. In every bullet I shoot, there is a message of justice, and all dreams wake like birds. In the hours of combat, in the battlefront, your image comes close to me. It is for you too that I fight, Mother, that you should not have tears in your eyes.
Senzeni senzeni na, senzeni na, senzeni na, senzeni na, senzeni na, senzeni na.